two, he said. It used to be called oops. It used to be called
Cyclothymia.
cyclothymia, but we've changed its name. It's similar to bipolar 1, which used to be called manic depressive, but with less extreme highs. Repeated episodes of depression as you had since you were a child does not make you fit into this diagnosis. I exhaled and felt better. What I'd been struggling with had a name, which meant other people had the same thing, so I was not alone. Some of the self-blame recrimination lifted. He changed the antidepressants I was on to a different kind and added in a mood stabilizing drug and sleeping tablets into the mix to help with my insomnia. While this all stabilized me, I hadn't bottomed out and needed to go into a clinic as a self-admitted inpatient stay for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. All the time. Once I left, I could keep my head above the lowest points and could just cope with life, including work. But I still thought I needed fixing, that there was something deeply wrong about me. I attended an NLP training run by, amongst others, Michael Neal. A few years later, during another bout of depression, I listened to an audio program of his during my train journeys into central London, and I began to feel better. I emailed Michael to thank him. A year or so later, I booked a half-day private session with him in his home in Los Angeles so that I could be fixed once and for all. I made a list of all the things I thought were wrong with me in preparation for seeing Michael. When I met with him, he listened to me but didn't buy any of them. I was frustrated. I told him I came to be fixed, and he told me I didn't need fixing. He was talking about different things from when I met him in the NLP training, and I didn't like it. But I liked something about him, and as we said goodbye, I know I'd be back. The following year, in 2012, I signed up for one of his courses. I was often confused and didn't get what he and the other three principal teachers were getting at most of the time, but I was enjoying myself. At the end, each person was asked, in turn, to share what they were most grateful for over the course. I am not my thinking, I said. Not sure who was saying these words that came out of my mouth. I feel very fortunate to have stumbled across the ultimate answer to human psychological well-being. Low self-esteem is a made-up construct. So to me is bipolar 2, the diagnosis I had received. Moods ebb and flow in everyone. There is nothing wrong with me. There never was. I am made better than I can imagine. What created me created the entire universe. I am conscious corner of the universe, able to look back at itself and say, wow.
Wow. And this was about Win Morgan, and I apologize to people who are listening and weren't able to make this time with us because I started the recording late. Win Morgan in Wales. I did not know this about Win. I just thought he was an extraordinary human. I don't know much about him, but Wendy may know more about Win. You may run into him more in the Facebook stratosphere. But yeah, just he comes. I've seen, I think, a couple of his webinars, videos, that 3PGC do. He's just a lovely, lovely person. I actually thought he was a physician, but I guess not. He works in business. Yeah. Really excited about the next chapter too. Yael, talking about psychosis. Everyone, I think all of us on the call know Yael, Yael in Israel. So anything you want to say about Win before I jump into Yael's story?
Yeah, I think that what struck me about it is, once again, my nurse hat goes on and says, if anybody said, any non-medical person, right, any person that didn't go to college and medical school or nursing school or whatever, and said, I know everything about cardiac enzymes. I can name them all in my sleep. I know them all. I know the function of them all. That would be ridiculous. They don't know it all. But if somebody were to step up and like a regular human being that didn't go to medical school and said that they knew all that, we'd all roll our eyes, right? Especially Mary and me. We'd roll our eyes. Now, but the way that he worded it was, I know what's wrong with me, Michael Neal, and you're not addressing it all. I know everything there is to know about me and my brain. And I think that there is a lot of acceptance of that take in the world today, where people go, I know me. I am I'm addicted. I've got depression. I am in a bad marriage. I am like, people just kind of say as an acceptance of people's self evaluation in this emotional psychological realm that I would contend now is almost just as silly as saying, I own a heart. I know everything there is to know about hearts and my heart and my enzymes and my heart rate and my heartbeat and how much oxygen I'm getting in. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It's so phantasmagorical, our bodies, how they are constructed and how they work without my say so. My breathing is happening. My gut, the whole story that I always sing off that same song page. But we have been conditioned and accustomed to taking people at their word. Like, I'm a fuck up. I am, you don't know, but I need these Ativan. And so I just found that quite interesting that Wynn was very convinced of his, like he said, I kept talking to myself, and
Right.
however he worded it. But anyway, like, I just keep going back to and reviewing myself and knowing what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to Michael Neal and he's not buying what I'm selling. What is he, some sort of a whack job coach, right? Because that's just such an acceptable part of our society and our culture. So anyway, that's enough, but that was striking to me. And it was also striking to me, Laurie, that you said, I always thought that Win Morgan was an absolutely wonderful human being. And here it is, he had depression. I guess he really wasn't that wonderful of a human. So that made me laugh. That
I'm
made me
sorry, I
laugh.
didn't mean it that way. What
Yeah.
I meant was I would never in a million years
Right, I know.
imagine, but I went through the same thing and people
Right.
said the same thing about me.
Right, yeah. That's
So
what it just made
thanks,
me laugh to
Wendy.
say,
Yeah.
everybody that we meet in the world has a story.
Has a story. That's absolutely the point of it, that,
Yeah.
whether it's other people's story about us or our own story, people can have whatever story they have about us. If we don't know what it is or care what it is, it's not going to affect us.
Right.
But the
Mhm.
story that we tell ourselves, we've got low self-esteem, we've got this depression, oh boy, that's the culprit. Believing what we think, that is so erroneous.
Well, not only erroneous, but such a small, like, I could be depressed right now, but that doesn't mean I have depression. And there's so much more to me to the left and the right and behind me. And when you're just looking at just this, like, oh, poor me, I'm depressed and I need my pills, you're not taking into account,
Right.
it's like saying, oh, I know my heart. No, you don't. You really, none of us, the best cardiologist in the world is still mystified by how the heart works.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
You know what it reminds me of? Oh boy, it just flew out of my head. That's good. Wasn't important. But if I come back to what it was, I'll clue you all in. We could go on with the IL in the meantime. Um, yeah. Whew, let's see I'll take over a little bit from here. As a child growing up in a family of 10, I was busy with work, taking care of my siblings, cleaning and cooking. By the age of 9 or 10, I took on a lot of responsibility. I didn't think I had a choice. My usual mood was mad and upset. I can recall my siblings saying, "Yeah, Al, don't scare us," because I would yell at them to help me and clean up after themselves. I thought if only they would clean and everyone had what they needed, I would be able to stop. It was around this time I was diagnosed with ADD. Whenever anyone got upset, I would get really worked up thinking it was my fault, and I always tried to improve. If only I was better, they wouldn't feel that way. Growing up in this way, my mind became very busy, which I thought was me. I wish that one day everything would stop, but it never did. It only grew. I became very scared of the thoughts in my head. I did not understand why they were there, and I was scared to tell anyone about it. If they knew the thoughts going on in my head, they would know I'm crazy, and I would rather keep that to myself. I developed this belief that when I walked around the streets, people could read my thoughts. When I went on a bus and I thought I knew what other people were thinking, so it became even scarier because if I knew what they were thinking, then they knew what I was thinking. When I was about 15, I started having thoughts that it would be better if I just died. I had a dream of having my own restaurant because I loved food. But if that didn't work out, I would commit suicide at 26. There's a plan for you, right? When I was 23, I had my first manic psychotic episode, and I was hospitalized in Jerusalem and diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. And my diagnosis for ADD was changed to ADHD. I was put on meds. When I didn't get the help I thought I needed in a psychotic state, I climbed over hospital walls, ran away, and flew to New York. Man, I didn't know this about you. I was almost arrested on my stopover in Germany for accusing security of harassing me. After this episode, I was hospitalized in New York. Over the next 8 years, I had 5 more episodes on and off meds. When I came off the meds, I would have an episode, and in between, I was trying to have a life, but I wasn't happy anywhere. I would fly back and forth from Israel to New York. Every time I would miss someone, and I would have moods, and I would think I would feel better if I was somewhere else. I just want to stop for a moment because it just occurred to me that last line was what I meant to say in response to Wendy about it's not a depression. We are not a depression. We have depressed moods.
Mm-hmm.
We have moods. We go in and out. We're not anxious. That's not our identity. We go in and out of anxiety. And the more we see that, the less often the depression, the anxiety, the sadness, the bewilderment, the fear, it doesn't last as long. So that's the ticket, is seeing it as just, the natural flow, the ups and downs of life. And then we're not scared. I'm this, I'm that, I've got this, I've got that, I have to take meds for, I have to see a shrink for, blah, blah, blah. And again, this is all innocent evolution of humanity, people doing the best they thought for other humans. And thank heavens we're evolving. Anybody want to pick up over the next 8 years? Or should I? Oh my God, I'll keep going because I just read over the next 8 years, I had 5 more episodes on and off medication. When I came off the meds, I would have an episode, and in between, I was trying to have a life. Oh, I did read that. Before I was 30, I planned to go back to New York, but my childhood friend, Hannah Rosenblatt, that's Sha'al, his wife, and Sha'al is the person who puts on the annual conference in London, the annual 3P UK. So Hannah invited me to stay with them in London before I finally went and lived my life in New York. I remembered how being in their living room felt like how people described the feeling of being on the beach. So I said yes. When I got there, she said, "Come join me at work. We're having a 3-day workshop." I had no idea what it was about, but I thought spending 3 days with my friend would be okay. I sat in the workshop and started hearing the way the teacher spoke. It was different. It felt to me like they were describing a Bible of what goes on in my head. And I was amazed because I never heard anyone speak like that before. For the first time in my life, I felt that I wasn't the only crazy one. In the next few days, I heard a few things that moved me. There's a man named Sidney Banks who saw into insecurity, that it was a thought. I thought my personality was mad, sad, and insecure. I thought to myself that if one person could see into insecurity, also I could. So I felt a little hope. I also heard that everyone lived in the middle of mental health. And that really moved me. I didn't understand how, but something inside me got curious. On the third day, I saw that if everyone in the world would know that experience is created from within, we would have peace in the world. I'm going to read that again. I saw that if everyone in the world would know that experience is created from within, we would have peace in the world. But I knew I had to start with me. In the next 6 months, I lost 50 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds. Does anybody know? It's a lot. I think it's a lot. I had been eating my thoughts since I was 11 years old. Being aware of my thoughts meant they became very noisy, and I ended up going back to Israel so that I could be close to my family and doctors. I would listen to Sid and other teachers, and I became less mad and upset. 2 years later, I went to the 3P UK conference and I walked into a breakout session with Dr. Bill Pettit. Somebody asked him when a person can go off medications. Dr. Pettit answered something along the lines that when we understand the connection between our spiritual nature and our human nature, we will know. In that moment, it was like everything stopped, and I saw how the manic episodes were created by me in my mind. And in that moment, I knew I was mentally healthy. A year later, I was ready to detox. I read that a person should take a month for every year they were on the medication, and so it took me 8 months to detox. I was always scared for the manic episodes to come back. One Friday afternoon, I'm finishing up work at the restaurant. I was cleaning the stove and I saw this tsunami of thoughts come over me. For a moment, I saw the collection of all those manic thoughts. I looked at them and didn't know what to do. So I continued cleaning the stove and watched them all go by. And then they were all gone. Amazing. When I went off the meds completely, I started getting those old feelings that were very familiar to me. I started getting mad and insecure, and I started losing myself. I had what my doctor called a quick manic episode. But because I knew it was my thinking, I was protected. When I woke up to the fact that it was happening again, that I'm in an episode, I stopped. I stopped listening to everyone around me. It was the first time I was aware of depression. I called Hannah and I said, "Why am I feeling depressed?" She asked, "What do I want to do?" I said, "Watch a movie." So she said, "Go watch a movie." And I said, "I don't want to watch a movie because I'm depressed. I just want to watch a movie." So she said, "Okay." I turned on Netflix, started watching, and about 2 minutes in, I realized I felt better. I turned off the computer and I woke up. Depression was gone. I decided to go back to my life. Wow. Oh,
Mm.
wow. It's just so amazing. Just so amazing. I never met Hannah. I mean, I never met Yael in life. I hope to someday, but we've spoken on some Zoom calls. Yeah. And Dr. Pettit recommended one of my clients talk with her because they had such a similar uh, path.
So
You
did
might
you
say.
see in the chat that 50 kilos equals 110 pounds?
Oh, wow.
She lost 110 pounds?
I don't know.
No
I don't
way.
know if she did or she didn't, but
Wow. You'd never know it, not in a million years.
see, Lori?
That goes to show you, right? That life is just full of amazement when we don't know, when we're not in the place of knowing something. It's just full of amazement and curiosity and interest and woo woo. Yeah. I love the phrase resting in the unknown.
Hmm.
Like not knowing is such a great place to be. Anybody want to comment on Yale before we move on to another reader reading David and Schizophrenia in the USA?
Resting in the unknown is great unless you need to get gas for the car because you're stuck by the side of the road. So the known is very useful.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
That's the brain, the ability to absolutely.
Mhm.
But I think what's meant by that kind of popular phrase in the 3P community, and I could be wrong, who knows, but to me that phrase means like when we think we know something and it's perturbing us, like I know I have depression, I know I have anxiety, I know there's something wrong with me, those kinds of knowings that, like you were saying, Wendy, earlier, like we
Yeah,
could know about our enzymes, right?
right. I agree. I'm just being a smart ass about the fact that resting in the unknown is great a lot of times, but it's not all the time. Thank God. I can read.
All right.
David, schizophrenia. I grew up in Florida. Drinking was real normal in my world. My dad was abusive and would really lose it at me. He beat my mom too, so she wasn't able to defend me. I couldn't concentrate in school a lot, and I got into a lot of trouble. I was scared to go home and couldn't make friends at school. I didn't feel safe anywhere. The school said I had to go to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with emotional and behavioral difficulties. I was kicked out of the house when I was 16. My parents didn't want me around. At first, I stayed with another family or whoever. I was very depressed. I got very scared and felt lost. I started to get really paranoid and often thought of killing myself. I tried to shut up the voices in my head by trying to be busy, but I couldn't keep a job because of all the noise in my head until no one could put up with me anymore, and eventually I ended up living on the streets. I started out at the Salvation Army shelter, but would go in and out of lots of shelters and programs for the next few years. Social workers sent me to doctors who prescribed medications that never really helped. I was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Living on the streets of Miami was hard. I was frightened all the time, and I always was searching for something to make the noise in my head go away. I got more and more paranoid that someone was going to hurt me or kidnap me or take my things. I thought people were following me and I couldn't sleep in case they found me. I think the lack of sleep was very bad for me. Eventually, I started using street drugs and thought I had found the answer, but this led to a psychotic breakdown. I was arrested and they put me in a psychiatric hospital for several months and forced me to take drugs. I was either terrified or numb. When I got out, I had no idea how to live, so I went to church, hoping to find some peace. I could see the other people had peace, but I couldn't find it. The good thing was that church program got me a job doing manual work on the grounds for big hotels, and being outdoors on my own most of the time gave me a chance for my thinking to slow down a little. It was hot and hard work, but I stuck at it. One of the workers on the program used to come and give us talks. I didn't get it at first, but he talked about how when we were up in our heads all the time, we can't enjoy life and that we just have to be present. The doctors had told me that my brain was broken and I had a chemical imbalance. So how could it be that simple? I had been up in my head for so long that I didn't know who to believe at first. The person running the program taught us about Sydney Banks and how we always thought he was insecure, but it was really his thinking. It started to make sense to me. I started to see that if I didn't pay those thoughts any attention, they would go away. One of the hotels I worked at, there was a stray cat, so I gave it some food. The manager told me off and said that it would encourage it to come back, and I thought, that's like what they say in the group. If you feed your thoughts, they will come back and stick around. Don't feed them and they will go away. I finished the program, but they continue to support me, and I still go back to the group to support other guys and for the community. The best was that I was able to keep my job, which meant I could get an apartment. I started to feel safe for the first time in my life. I finally had my own place. It was the first time I could really say I had a home. My thinking started to slow down even when I was alone. I was able to get off the medications. I had to go slowly, and the people in the program guided me and supported me. It was very up and down, but I knew I had innate health, so I hung in there and I knew I just didn't need the meds anymore. I can still get caught up sometimes, but I have learned that it's okay, so it never becomes that paranoid kind of thinking anymore. It's like my mind is a safe neighborhood now. I am now living as me and not my diagnosis. Before I learned about how the mind works, I thought I was my paranoid thinking. I thought I had to listen to the voices, but now I see that that's just some really bad thinking weather that's going through my head and it passes by. I have heard people who I would call normal or educated say they have weird or crazy thoughts too, and I thought it was just me. So I don't know if they are crazy or I'm normal, but maybe we're all the same. I know now that our minds all work the same, and it's what we do with the thoughts that matters. I am now in a loving relationship. I am able to think about someone else and be there for them. Before, when my head was full of voices, I couldn't really know what anyone else wanted. I can still feel a bit chaotic sometimes, and I think about how the stray cat goes away if I don't pay it attention. This means I have room in my head now for other things like kindness. We rescued a cat and I called him Sid. I have found
Uh,
that peace I was looking for. I feel safe and I'm very grateful.
uh, I don't know who that is. Do any of you know?
No.
Yeah, he called his cat Sid. That's adorable.
Mhm.
Ah, wow. And take a breath or two and then come. And we probably have time. Yeah, we have time for yet another chapter.
I can read.
Any readers?
I'll read. I'm sorry, I just keep getting up because my dogs keep wanting to go in and out, in and out. They're like little children, but you're in now, so hopefully they'll be fine while I read.
They
Bipolar.
can't make up their mind, huh?
No, they're just me crazy. Bipolar, Tom Sills. My life was busy and chaotic. I worked as a manager for a large construction company in Hawaii, dealing with employees and multiple vendors, which tested my daily strength levels. On a personal side of life, I was on my third marriage, so home life was no better. Not having my children around was not a good thing for me either. It was the best and the worst at the same time. The controlled chaos of daily life seemed to be normal. My mind and my thoughts were no different, chaotic, void, and stressed all the time. Life was a series of trial and error, many of which had less than desirable outcomes. I had my fair share of run-ins with the law and legal systems and countless violent acts. But one day there was a very, very quick split-second thought at a quiet time that I realized I needed help. it would be my first attempt at therapy, not knowing anyone who was in therapy or a therapist. I had no one to talk to or inquire about how to go about it. The desire to somehow better myself led me to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist and a therapist. Sometimes all of them in the same week. About the voluntary nature of these treatments seemed to work against me, as they only created more questions and thoughts in my mind. These appointments had me trying different prescription treatments. Being open-minded, I gave the medications a try with mixed results. The bipolar/anger issues/depression diagnosis given to me by others seemed to get worse with drugs. Having given up illegal drugs, giving up legally prescribed drugs was not hard. One day I decided not to do any illegal drugs, and another day came, I decided not to do the prescription drugs. The thought and the choice to not do drugs have kept me drug-free to this day. The different conversions with the professionals had me thinking, and a lot of thought was given to what others thought about me. The cycle of thinking and thoughts seemed to have me going around in circles. All this happened over a period of time. A friend referred me to a therapist and said, just give it a try and it will change your life. I made the call to Christine Heath, who does the 3 principles. She saved my life, literally. There are not enough words to describe the desolate, deepest, darkest thought of, sorry, I'm getting lost here, of depression and loneliness that a person can create in their own mind and bring it to reality in their life, to the point of taking their own life and believing that their thought was a good idea. She helped me to see that my behaviors and actions were a result of faulty thinking and that I didn't have to listen to them. I, like many people, had underestimated the power of thought. Over the years, I have come to see my thoughts and the thought process, what it does to how I perceive daily life. Having the courage to recognize how it works and what it can do is the amazing part. Always listen and be humble, because your thoughts will interact with others and their thoughts, and that is what creates the journey of life. My hope is that these simple, brief words will be a trigger of thought for you and bring hope that things can change like they did for me. My life was busy and chaotic. I worked as a manager for a large construction company in Hawaii, dealing with employees and multiple vendors, which tested my daily stress levels. On a personal side of life, I was in my 3rd marriage, so home life was no better. Not having my children around was not a good thing for me either. It was the best and the worst at the same time. The control.
This is a typo. It's double printed, so you can stop at like they did for me. My life was busy and chaotic. It was printed twice.
Okay. So then my mind and thoughts were
No, we're all done.
Oh, so the whole thing is all done?
Oh, the rest of it is a copy of the first part.
I thought
Yeah.
Right. It just it's a book that just got printed wrong, and
Okay.
so it ends at always listen and be humble, because your thoughts will interact
okay.
with others and their thoughts, and that is what creates the journey of life. And then
Okay.
the rest of it's just a cut and paste. So
I'm gonna just mark that off on my book.
Yeah, the very last sentence on page 92 is, my hope is that these simple, brief words will be a trigger of thought for you and bring hope that things can change like they did for me. So
Yeah.
hopeful, isn't it? You know, there was one line on the bottom that Mary read, the bottom of page 90, that really was such a highlight for me. Where this fellow Tom says, she helped me see that my behaviors and actions were a result of faulty thinking and that I didn't have to listen to them.
yeah.
Boy, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
When you've got light shining on you, that's like
Literally.
It's like moving. Do you see it? It's
Mhm.
moving. It's like whoa, 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 like yeah. It must be like the leaves or something outside.
There are no
Making-
leaves in my neighborhood. Maybe in your neighborhood, but not in my neighborhood.
What's making it do that?
I don't
Yeah,
know.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I just love that. So, faulty thinking, the faulty thinking, all of these chapters, all of these stories are about the faulty thinking we all do. And we don't have to listen to them.
Well, isn't that the crux of the entire thing of the three principles is faulty thinking? So it's no wonder that every story in the book is about that, right? Yeah.
And, to be able to boil down all the diagnoses and everybody's problems in life to the fact that it's all coming from inside of us, our own faulty thinking, because we can't think truth.
Right.
The only truth is the fact that we think.
And the other thing is that when you talk about the fact that people say, I don't, my behavior and my thinking is a result of my false thinking, and now I don't have to listen to it anymore. That's what all the prisoners will say. Like, I thought I was a criminal inside and outside. And you mean I don't have to steal? I don't have to um hit little old ladies off the head? I don't have to do any of that, really? I thought that's what I was destined to be and do.
Mhm.
And that's why it's been so effective in prisons too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But we don't have Stuart with us. He's been a busy boy these days. Yeah. Yeah, to wake up and realize, oh my God, that's not who I am. That's just who I thought I was, but that's not literally who I am.
Right.
Mind blowing, isn't it? All right, we got time for one more. Any readers?
I can pick up again. Schizophrenia, case study by Dr. Tom Kelly, USA. This concerns a man that I am seeing right now as a licensed psychologist. This fellow came in, a nice guy. I'd say he's in his 50s, maybe early 60s. And we began to talk. And he began to tell me that he was concerned about people coming into his home and messing with his food and his medications. And that when he would go out to dinner with his wife, for example, he'd be sitting there and there'd be people at other tables that would be looking at him and talking about him. It became very clear to me that this guy is having what psychologists would call delusional episodes. Interestingly, I recalled how it was for me, maybe 20 or 25 years ago before I discovered the principles. Back then, if somebody had come in like that before, I would have felt very uncomfortable. I would have felt somewhat anxious. And the reason is because I didn't have the understanding that I now have. So I was kind of frightened or scared by those thoughts that he would have been telling me back then. And it was interesting because when I was talking with him, because I don't typically see people with psychotic disorders, but every now and then somebody comes in, something occurred to me. Sid has a great talk, which he calls the Great Illusion. The idea being that we're all living in an illusion that's created by our thinking. What the patient was telling me was the same thing, except his illusions were kind of across the line of what is considered normal versus abnormal illusions. So the psychiatrist had categorized him probably as borderline, even schizophrenic. And he says to me, my wife is just sick and tired of me telling her about this. In fact, when we had dinner the other night, I told her, those guys over there are talking about me. And she said, for crying out loud, would you stop that? I don't want to hear any more of that stuff. And he was concerned. I mean, obviously he loves his wife, but yet he's concerned about this. So I ended up saying to him, this happens to me all the time too. And he said, it does? I said, well, yeah. I said, in fact, let me give you an example. I was in Florida last summer and I woke up and I wasn't in the greatest mood. And so I decided to take a walk down the beach. I just had my shorts on and that was it, like a bathing suit, only shorts. It was spring break and there were a lot of young girls sitting on the blankets out there on the beach. So I'm walking by, and these girls started laughing, and I thought, oh my God, I haven't been working out. I'm an older guy. They're laughing at me. And then I thought of a few others like that and told him and explained that we're all living, in our own separate reality. And when he left, he said to me, God must have brought me to the right place. I can't believe that you and I have the same thing. It's really nice to be working with somebody who's experienced the same things as me. And so I shook hands with him. When he came back, we had another talk about it. And I said, you know what? When I'm feeling upset about the way I have these delusions, I just try to do my best not to take them seriously. And what I find is that they come and go. But because I don't take them seriously anymore and talk to people about them like you do to your wife, I seem to be feeling better about them. He said, okay, fine. He came back the next day and he said, well, I went to dinner with my wife and there were two guys talking to me over there at the other table, looking at me and very suspiciously. He said, well, what did you do? He said, well, I didn't talk to my wife about it. I didn't even say anything to her. And I said, how'd it go? Well, actually, we had a pretty nice dinner. I thought to myself, this is the kind of curious. I've never really done it before. It was just something that happened. I continued, John, that's wonderful. I think you realized something very important, and it's the same thing that I realized that improved my relationship with my wife. When I'm having upsetting thought attacks, I do my best to let them pass through and don't share them with her. When I calm down, I feel more secure and in control, and things look more manageable. John responded, well, that's what I'm trying to do. At that point, another thought hit me, and John agreed with his suggestion. Together, we watched the Great Illusion video. At our third session, I was able to share more with John about the power of thought, the role of feelings in signaling the health of people's thinking, and the tremendous resource of innate mental health via a clear personal mind. John seems to be catching on to the way the human psychospiritual system operates. He agrees with me that if he stays in his health, he will be better prepared to handle whatever circumstances life throws at him, real or imagined. I believe that John is more comfortable and receptive to these new understandings because he believes that we, John and me, are the same. And of course, we are.
Lovely,
Beautiful,
lovely,
beautiful,
just lovely.
beautiful.
Said it. You said it.
Perfect.
Since it mentioned the Great Illusion, maybe we'll play that next Tuesday. You could play that one, that video. I was going to play Exploring the True Meaning of Mind at West Virginia University conference back in 2005. Boy, oh boy.
That's only 20 years ago. That's very recent.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to read some of the comments I mean, there are beautiful comments to this Quiet Mind YouTube of Sid's. This fellow says, for about 1 year, I've had a profound feeling of peace that comes from accepting and not fighting. And I started listening. Some days I get like a split second of totally understanding. And I'm so in alignment in what I am. Yeah, interesting. It was a translation from, I think, Swedish. Yeah, boy, I just feel so filled with gratitude right now, that
Yeah.
for our little group, and it's a microcosm. Our little group feels to me like it's a microcosm of the world.
Mhm.
And this is being released into the world that makes such a huge difference for people.
Mhm.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So with 9 minutes to go, we could probably go through bipolar, a case study by Bill Pettit, Dr. William Pettit.
Anybody have any need to not do it? I'm happy to read it. Is you okay, Mary?
Yeah.
All right, great. Bipolar, a case study by Dr. William Pettit, number 1. I don't know what that means, but Dr. Bill Pettit, Claudia was a 58-year-old married woman who was referred to me by her family therapist for ECT. She had a diagnosis of bipolar. She had not responded to multiple psychiatric medications and received 14 years of psychotherapy. Claudia had been told by her mother that she had tried to abort her, and she was an ugly duckling that would never become a swan. She'd been married for 40 years to a good man, but had been hospitalized multiple times for depression and suicidal thoughts. She had been on Seroquel, Depakote, Dilantin, Effexor, and Depramine, just to mention a few of her daily medications. She had recently had a psychotic episode that resolved itself without hospitalization. When I first met her in 2000, I just need to stop for a second. I don't know much about psychiatric medications, but I'm betting dollars to donuts that none of those are things that are currently being um, prescribed.
Seroquel, Effexor is definitely still being prescribed.
Okay.
Not so much Depakote or Dilantin. I
Yeah.
don't know what Dipramine is, but
Yeah.
Seroquel
Just-
is very popular.
Okay, just to point to the fact that if there was a cure in the pill bottle, it would have stayed since the first pill was given.
Right.
Right.
Good point. Good point.
So anyway, she had recently had a psychotic episode that resolved itself without hospitalization. When I first met her in 2000, she came willingly. She was cooperative but had slight psychomotor retardation. She appeared depressed but was able to pass her psych evaluation adequately. She admitted to having suicidal thoughts but didn't fear losing control of them. She talked about being depressed and her fear of it was only getting worse. We agreed to hold off on the ECT treatment and kept her medications the same as she was leaving for a vacation, but I asked her to read The Missing Link by Sydney Banks, and she agreed. When she returned, we started both group and individual sessions. Before I started working with Claudia, she had a BDI score of 32, the Beck Depressive Inventory. Just after 3 individual sessions and 1 group session, her score was just 9. Claudia, I was probably at the lowest I'd ever been. I had been treated for clinical depression and bipolar disorder for 14 years, and with various medication changes, I have been able to stay fairly stabilized. With each medication change, I seemed to do okay, but this last time, I just couldn't seem to get out of that dark pit. I have a very loving family. We all get along, so I didn't have anything to be depressed about. But I just couldn't reach the good feelings anymore. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't decide whether I should brush my teeth or comb my hair. I had been putting on a mask to look like I enjoyed life so as not to upset my family, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I was terribly tired and mostly slept. So my medical doctor said maybe we'd messed around with the medications long enough, and that it was time to take a more serious step, and that we should try electroshock treatment. I ended up seeing a psychiatrist called Dr. Bill Pettit, who suggested we hold off on the ECT and try some new therapy. I was a little annoyed as I'd been doing psychotherapy for years, but I agreed. I attended his group therapy session and they were reading The Missing Link by Sydney Banks, and I kept wondering what they were talking about. Dr. Pettit would stand up and make comments and ask for comments, but most of the patients didn't say much. I had been getting more and more agitated, and finally, I said in a loud, screamy voice, "Does anyone know what he's talking about?" There was dead silence, and I burst out crying and left and left. I was sitting in my car trying to get myself calm enough to drive home when Dr. Pettit came and tapped on my window to get me to come back in. He talked with me for 2 more hours. He asked me to give it a chance. I agreed, but I continued to fight with Sydney Banks's ideas. I kept going to group therapy and the individual therapy, and somewhere along the line, I did what Mr. Banks tells us to do, and I stopped trying to analyze and waited for a feeling. I had an aha moment. It wasn't even really anything I can describe, but suddenly realized I had this health in me, that no matter how hard I tried to kill it, it was going to be there, and it was very overwhelming. That night I wrote a poem which seemed to solidify it. It was all coasting from there, really. I still get some anger or upset, but I've learned something that lets me cope with it. In the past, I just wanted to erase everything, but now I don't have to. I can cope with the feelings. I have learned that I can take those feelings as a warning signal that I need to get a little bit more quiet and let this natural ability of my body take over instead of trying to control it all myself. Now I just enjoy life. I enjoy people so much now. My husband has been a people person, and I would tell him, don't you bring anyone to my house. I don't want to socialize with people. I'm scared. Okay. I'm scared. Well, I don't feel that way anymore. I feel I have so much love inside that I gotta let it out all the time. I have to hug them and have a good time. There is so much joy in waking up in the morning now. I'm only sleeping 8 hours a night now instead of 12 to 20. I'm not tired like I used to be. I do more work now than when I was sleeping more. I laugh at the stuff I had written in my journals now. It all looks so ridiculous, but now there's so much to enjoy. Knowing that I have control over how I react to outside things is what makes a difference for me. I can still get angry or react sometimes, but I catch myself. I have more good days than I have bad days. Another thing is that it's our health that we discuss, not our problems. The therapy I went for years was problem talking. But as I heard from Dr. Pettit, that just makes you stay in the problem longer. But as I heard from, I had heard that people blame their parents, so I used to blame my mother for everything. But then I thought, but my kids are going to blame me. Emphasizing the health rather than the problem has been a miraculous idea. The idea that what is in the past is just a thought, and what is in the future is just a thought was rather novel to me at first. I know that what was in the past was a reality, but knowing now that the past is just a thought and thoughts come and go has really helped me not hold grudges, especially against myself. I used to be so critical of myself for things I did 10 years ago. I don't have to think of myself as bad because of something bad I did one time or once did. It's been like falling in love all over again, only it's a different level of love. I've always loved my husband, but now I enjoy my love for him more than I look for his love for me. I am almost a new person. I love the way I feel. Dr. Bill Pettit. After 8 individual sessions and 12 group sessions, Claudia's BDI was down to 2. This is a drop of 30 points. Amazing.
What a tearjerker, huh? I have
Yeah.
the video of Claudia. I'll post it in our Facebook group. I have the
Great.
video. I saw the presentation 100 years ago at I don't even know if it was called the Three Principles Conference back then. I think it was called Psychology of Mind when I heard it. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Woo! What a great way to start the afternoon and the rest of the day. So much hope for the world. Just so much hope.
Can I
Yep.
share something? This is what I'm doing.
Oh,
Oh, look at you.
Course.
Ah,
Wow.
I'm so excited.
It's
Me
on,
too.
been online.
That's great. That's great. Had you ever heard of it before yesterday?
I've heard of it, but I didn't realize what it entailed. So I started researching it a little bit. And there's,
Good.
things that cost a whole lot more than what I paid for this because this was really, really cheap. You can go to university to do it. But I thought, you know what? It's just a little title I want at the end of my.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Beautiful, Mary. I'm
Good.
going to stop the